Genshin Impact came out in 2020, and ever since then it's been a massive hit, played by millions, and it's earned billions in revenue. When I first started playing Genshin Impact, I thought it was just a Breath of the Wild ripoff with more anime girls and gambling. But as I played the game, I really saw its charm, and it's only grown on me since I first started. Since then, the game has added massive regions, expanded its very simple but deep combat system, continued with tons of story and side quests, and it's also added a lot of limited time special events and special items. But it's been several years since the game's initial release, and a lot of people wonder if it's still worth playing, especially when other big games like World of Warcraft and Fortnite can go from beloved to hated within just a few years. So with all the content that Genshin has added, does that make the game feel bloated and unapproachable? Or does it have the opposite problem, since there's a lot of content that's no longer available? Is Genshin Impact worth playing now? Will new players be at a huge disadvantage? Or will they simply experience some minor inconveniences? Hey everyone, Sharkheart here, and in this video we'll go over how playing Genshin is quite different today and if it's still worth playing. I'll give you my perspective as someone who has progressed to the highest levels and beaten the hardest content multiple times on multiple accounts, and who has also started over in different regions to compare how things are different now. That's why in this video I'll cover the basics of the game for players who are thinking about trying Genshin Impact, and then I'll cover what former players can expect if they plan to return to the game. This includes what's the same, what's different, what you'll miss out on, and how much of an impact that will have for you overall. And finally I'll cover the benefits that players have starting now compared to if they started earlier. And just to get this out of the way, I know you're wondering if it's really too late to start playing Genshin Impact. The short answer is no, it's absolutely not too late. The core experience of the game hasn't really changed, and the biggest difference is simply the sheer amount of content and characters available. I'll talk about how this adds a lot of variety and ways to play the game, and then later we'll talk about how that's both a good and bad thing. But for now, it's important to know that Genshin Impact is designed to be played at your own pace. There is no competitive leaderboards, and the endgame and post-story content all consists of solo activities. In fact, while Genshin does have a co-op experience, it's not really that great because Genshin was originally designed to be a solo player game, and the co-op experience was kind of shoehorned in a lot later, so it doesn't work the greatest. For those reasons, you don't have to worry about trying to catch up to other players. You can start at basically any time, and as the game continues to add more regions, quests, characters, and game modes, you'll have tons of content to play through and explore no matter when you start. And speaking of exploration, that is the main thing that initially drew me into the game. Exploring the open world and seeing all the really nice scenery, running around in different locations, climbing mountains, gliding all over the map, while also solving different puzzles for treasure is a ton of fun. Now they've also added underwater exploration, which adds another level to the open world experience. My personal experience with underwater exploration in games has not been very good, but Genshin has done a pretty decent job with it, despite some of the maneuverability and combat issues I really dislike while exploring beneath the waves. To be honest, a lot of these features are things that you would expect from big open world games. What surprised me though was the elemental system and how it affects the world. You could say I was initially drawn in by the open world exploration aspects of the game, but stayed for the elemental system. Each character you can obtain has the ability to control a specific element, and that element will interact with the world in unique ways. You can use fire to set the ground ablaze, causing anyone, enemies or yourself, to take damage while standing on the burning ground. You can freeze water with ice, even to the point of being able to walk on it and travel to faraway islands by making platforms of ice across the water. There's a sizable amount of elemental combinations that you can use in the open world for fun and to solve puzzles, and combining different elements is also extremely relevant to combat, which we'll talk about more later. As much as I like the open world exploration, the elemental system in Genshin Impact really drew me in, and I think it's pretty special because it's pretty easy to understand in broad strokes, but it's also very, very deep. But beyond the open world experience, there's a ton of story quests, challenging combat content, a player housing mode where you can design the interior and exterior of your realm, and even an in-game trading card battling system. Genshin is also a free-to-play game with a gacha or wishing system. And this is the main way this game makes tens of millions of dollars every month. You get a few characters for free, and you can get a random character every now and then from a special limited events, but the way you get most of your characters or special weapons is by wishing, or using in-game currency to basically play a digital slot machine. You get a small amount of in-game currency by completing special daily quests, as well as completing the story and doing some other little things here and there, including limited time events. However, you can bypass all that saving and just buy in-game currency, but just so you know, it can take several $100s to get a character you want, and many of those characters are only available for a limited time, and you won't be able to obtain them again for several months. This is very typical of gacha games. They create a gambling system that will eventually pay out, and they incentivize people to wish for characters by creating scarcity so that there's inherently more value to wishing and to buying the in-game currency so they can get more characters. The good news is that you don't really need that many characters in Genshin Impact, and new characters that come out often do not power creep some older, stronger characters. And Genshin is also a single player game, so you can play however you want and you don't have to try and wish and spend money to try and keep up with some sort of PvP meta or something like that. But beyond wishing, there is just so much to experience while playing Genshin Impact. When I first started playing, we were starved for content, but if I started the game fresh again today, it would take me months to get through everything, even if I played every single day. Which is exactly why I want to talk about what has stayed the same, what is different, and what you can expect when playing Genshin Impact. If you're finding this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and sub to the channel. You can see a lot more videos on topics like this, and it really helps me out. Thank you so much for all of your help. Now let's continue. So let's first talk about what has stayed the same. Number 1, while you can spend a ton of money on Genshin Impact, it still offers a good free-to-play experience. No content is gated by spending, it's only limited characters and weapons that you'll have to spend your primo gems for. But exploring the vast world, solving the many different puzzles, getting chests, and combining different elements to make powerful attack combinations are still in the base game, and they can be experienced by anyone without spending a single cent. And like I said before, there are tons of immersive quests to get involved in, whether it's the main story, side story, or some sort of more off-the-wall ones like kind of a faux dating sim or a card battling game. So the free-to-play experience has stayed largely the same with a few additions. The next thing that's the same is the gacha or wishing system, and this is to the ire of many people, unfortunately. You get a few characters at the start of the game by playing the story, and then it gets progressively harder. And one of the best ways to improve your account is by collecting a variety of characters to add to your roster to give you a lot of different types of teams that you can build to take on different types of challenges. Unfortunately, pretty much all of the characters in the game are attained through the gacha or wishing system, which is basically like a slot machine, but only with slightly better odds of hitting a jackpot. And when I am talking about slightly better odds of hitting a jackpot, I'm talking about wishing and getting a 5-star, which is the highest rarity character you can get. You can get 4-star characters and 5-star characters. 4-star characters are generally weaker than 5-star characters, though there are some that are incredibly broken and even stronger than most 5-stars, but generally the 5-star characters are the ones that people really go after. And while you're playing this digital slot machine to get some of these limited 5-star characters, there is a system that ensures that you can basically buy your way to a 5-star character, but it's not cheap and it can take up to $200 for a single copy of a 5-star character, and it may not be the one that you want. So if you were really unlucky and had none of the game's premium currency saved up, it could actually take you up to $400 to guarantee a single copy of a limited 5-star character. However, you don't have to spend any money to get these characters, you just have to save for a long time. The game will give you premium currency regularly from daily commissions and special events that only take a few minutes to complete. So you can definitely save up and guarantee yourself a specific special limited 5-star, but it can take about 3 months worth of saving in order to do that. And these special 5-star characters' banners only last 3 weeks before they disappear, and they often don't come back for 6 months or more on average. Luckily, you don't really need that many characters, but you'll probably find that if you play Genshin Impact, there are a lot of characters that you end up wanting. So really, the gacha system is pretty much the same, and unfortunately, it is not any better for players. Which is why at this point, I want to give everyone a huge word of warning if you're interested in playing Genshin Impact. Do not start this game if you are the type of person who wants to collect every character, because it's not realistic unless you're willing to spend hundreds of dollars per month on the game. They just come out with too many characters too frequently to catch them all. And it's not like you can't get through the game with only a handful of characters, and luckily there's not too much power creep in the game, so just be aware that if you want to get all of the characters, you are not going to be able to unless you plan on spending quite a bit. The next thing that stayed the same that a lot of people have a big complaint about is resin. The resin system is what limits your character progression, so you can't just rush and build your characters to their max right away. To build a character, you need to level them up and ascend them, level up their weapon, level up their talents and abilities, and give them special artifacts that allow them to do more damage, healing, or whatever else they're specialized in. And getting these special items required to level up these various aspects of your characters all takes resin. Going in special domains and getting items will take 20 resin, and fighting world bosses will take 40 resin. And your resin is capped at 160, even though 180 resin actually represents a 24-hour period, meaning you would have to spend your 160 resin and then come back and spend another 20 if you wanted to be the most efficient with it. In the beginning of the game, this isn't a big deal because it's not very expensive to build your characters. But as you progress, it takes more and more resin to build up a character. For example, in the beginning of the game, you could fight a world boss twice and have enough special boss materials to ascend your character, but as you get up in the higher stages of the game, you might have to fight a boss for 2 days straight just to get enough materials to level them up. So if you like the aspect of Diablo or Final Fantasy XIV where you can just grind out gear or do extreme trials until you get exactly what you want, Genshin may not be for you because your character gear and progression is gated by the resin system. This is also why I made a guide that gives you a step-by-step breakdown of how to most effectively spend your resin to progress through the game, and that will be linked in the description of this video. Of course, you can spend your way to victory and get more resin by spending more money, but there's actually a cap on that, and you can't spend enough that would make a huge significant difference, at least in the short run. And this just brings up an interesting point about Genshin and gacha games in general. You can end up spending a lot more, but that in turn makes you play a lot less. Because you can buy your way to get the best characters and the best weapons, and then spend as much as you can to max them out faster than everyone else, and inevitably you will just clear content so fast that you don't have anything else to do in the game. So if you are interested in playing Genshin or coming back, I recommend not spending for a couple weeks to a month and just see how you feel. If you feel like you don't need to spend and everything is going really well, that's a good sign. If you feel like you are spending because you want to, that's also not a bad sign. But if you feel like you have to spend because that's the only way to progress, that's not a very good sign, and you should come on Twitch and ask me questions so I can help you get out of that funk. Because believe me, I've been there when I first started and it does not feel good. Luckily, I was able to get out of that funk without spending, so if you're in that position, come catch me live on stream and I'll do my best to help you out. So to recap on what stayed the same, the core of the game is basically the same as it has been ever since launch. The progression system, the resin system, the wishing system, and the overall gameplay is pretty much the exact same. So with the core of the game staying pretty much the same as it was at launch, just being a little bit more expanded upon, and with so much more to explore and experience, what exactly are you missing out on if you started playing right now? Well, people starting now will miss out on one major thing, and that's limited time events. Every 6 weeks, Genshin releases a new content patch, and every patch has several mini events and one big grand flagship event. These flagship events give you the best rewards, including free characters and weapons. However, they also give you insights to characters, deeper lore, and even have some extremely cool limited time areas to explore. In addition to these rewards every single patch, there's also some special seasonal rewards, like 4-star characters' alternative outfits. These are given out for free in these events, but only for a few times during the year. These outfits later become purchasable in the store, but that makes a lot of players feel punished for not playing earlier simply because if they wanted that alternative costume, they have to pay for something that other players got for free already. And arguably the worst disadvantage about these limited events is not missing out on the free 4-star characters or special 4-star skins, but missing out on the free 4-star weapons. You can always get one of the 4-star characters that are given away from these limited events from wishing, even if it is totally random, and you can also get the 4-star skins if you decide to pay for them. But what you cannot get are the 4-star limited event weapons if you miss out on them. Some of these weapons are really great, not only because they might be good weapons, but they might just be really fun and hilarious, like the Luxurious Sea Lord, which lets you smack enemies with a giant fish. Other limited event weapons are very good, even being some of the best possible weapons available for certain characters, like the Cinnabar Spindle for Albedo. Unfortunately, these limited event weapons are no longer obtainable, and at the time of recording of this video, there is no way to get them at all if you missed out on them. And honestly, that is the biggest concern with starting right now, and while it does suck, it's not really game breaking in any way. However, it's not the only disadvantage to starting right now. But don't worry too much because these disadvantages of starting now are mostly temporary annoyances instead of being game-ruining handicaps. Outside of not having all the freebies from previous limited time events, the other disadvantages of being a new player to Genshin include: Number 1, a larger pool of 4-star characters that are frankly not that good or very niche. A lot of the OG 4-star characters like Xingqiu, Beidou, Xiangling, Bennett, Sucrose, and more are extremely good and still used today. However, a lot of the newer 4-stars that came out are not that great or good, but only in a very specific role or situation. The fact that there's so many more 4-star characters that are either not that good or very niche means that the pool of available characters you can get are diluted between really good characters that you can use basically anywhere, and characters that are super niche that you need to build an entire team around, which is really difficult if you're newer. Another big disadvantage for newer players is getting to Inazuma and leveling up characters that come from the Land of Lightning. Inazuma is the only nation that is hard-locked by an Archon story quest, meaning that you have to do a certain number of story quests in order to even access the nation, whereas every other nation you can just walk or run to if you really want to. But Inazuma is hard-locked, and if you try to get there early, you will definitely not be able to unless you find some way to glitch the game, which, I mean, who would ever do that? That just sounds crazy. But this is a really big disadvantage if you get characters from Inazuma early on, because that means you're going to have to wait a long time to level them up, get their special boss materials, collect the other sort of world materials that they need in order to progress past level 40. Luckily, it's not like the rest of your characters will be level 80 or 90 by the time you get to Inazuma. Realistically, you'll be in around the level 50 range, so if your Inazuman characters can only be level 40, and the rest of your characters can be level 50, it's not that big of a deal, but it is still annoying. One other major disadvantage that happens with newer players or even returning players is that there's so much to do and collect, it can be very overwhelming. There are hundreds and hundreds of oculi to collect and tons of treasure chests to find, and so many areas to explore, including hidden areas and special hidden quests, that it can become really overwhelming, and it's very easy for someone to get totally lost. This is also true for the combat system because it's very simple at face value, but as soon as the Dendro element was introduced, things got a little bit more complicated. And by a little bit, I mean it can be very confusing for people who haven't played with a lot of Dendro teams before. That's why one of the disadvantages of starting or coming back to Genshin Impact Now is the game can feel especially overwhelming. That's also why I tell people they are welcome to come to stream and ask me questions about whatever they'd like to understand better. I know from personal experience that it's not always fun to figure these things out the hard way, which is also why I make videos like this, and guide videos, and try my best to answer people's questions on stream. Now that we've covered the disadvantages of starting or coming back to Genshin right now, let's talk about the advantages and what players can expect to have a leg up on compared to players who started much earlier. The first advantage is there is a lot of content. You will not get bored with playing Genshin. There is just so much to do. You would probably get overwhelmed and not want to play because there's simply too much to do rather than not having enough. The second major advantage is that you have a much broader, much deeper community that has a better understanding of mechanics, team building, and so forth that can help you out. When I started playing Genshin, the only people that were really in the spotlight were just giant whales, and they just simply spent their way to extreme victory, but now you don't have to do that, and you can get by really well without spending a dime just because we understand so much more, and we're willing and able to help you. The third major advantage of starting right now is that Genshin has a lot more quality of life upgrades compared to when it first launched. A lot of these quality of life upgrades may not feel that significant to newer players, but OG players have been asking for them for literally years in some cases. There have been some minor upgrades to things like sorting and auto-locking certain artifacts, to displaying an underground map, and claiming expedition rewards and then redeploying everyone with the click of a button. There have also been some upgrades to the resin system, though many people believe it should still be upgraded further. And there's even more upgrades to things like events and quests that now allow you to quick start them earlier with less hassle, which is super nice for newer players because they don't have to spend hours finishing one quest to simply start another quest that they actually want to do. Another major advantage of starting Genshin Impact right now is that you can have a lot of strong friends basically carry you through a lot of parts of the game. Not through every part of the game, but for certain domains and bosses, they can basically one-shot everything for you. You'll still have to do quite a lot on your own, but it's not too hard to make strong friends and enlist their help, especially through places like our Discord, and they can help you down tough bosses or domains and make things that are really challenging for you feel like a breeze. Another big advantage of starting right now is that we actually get more free permanent characters compared to when I first started, and we also get more free 4-star weapons. You can get characters like Actaully and Lynette for free permanently, and while they are not the best of the best characters, they are pretty solid and they're good at what they do, especially if you're just starting out. You can also get a few more 4-star weapons for free from certain character quests like the Karustrube Ishin from Kazuha's story quest, and you can also get a bunch more weapons from fishing, some of which are pretty good. So if you started out as a free-to-play player now, you would have more options to build and develop characters and teams compared to when I first started. Now that we've gone over what you can expect while playing Genshin Impact, as well as what the advantages are for playing now and what the disadvantages are, the big question is, do the advantages of playing Genshin Impact now outweigh the disadvantages? I would say that if you find a community to help and guide you, then they absolutely do. But if you don't like the gacha mechanics and the heavy amounts of resource management it takes to progress through the game, then they don't. Genshin is extremely easy at the start of the game, but it becomes pretty difficult at a certain point, and you realize that you just have no resources to level up your characters or do anything, and the game seems to keep progressing while it seems like you're lagging behind, and the only way it seems to catch up is to spend, and this is by design. This is what I call the wall of Genshin. It's the point of the game where players feel they have a general understanding of everything, but as they try to progress, the difficulty seems to shoot up out of nowhere, and they are left with very few resources to make themselves stronger. This is also the point where most players feel like they have to spend to progress, but this is not true. If you can get over the wall of Genshin, then you will be able to make steady progress and enjoy the game for a long time. That's why I think the most helpful and biggest advantage is to simply find a community that can help you plan the best course of action for you and your account, tell you who would be the best character to wish for, give you team building advice, and so forth. It's natural to wonder if a game that came out years ago is past its prime. World of Warcraft, Fortnite, and other popular games ended up feeling like bloated shadows of their former selves, so much so that people clamored for classic versions of those games. Genshin Impact feels like just the opposite though. It's only gotten better over time because it's become more accessible, older characters are becoming more viable, the story and writing is much better now than it used to be, and I for one would hate to go back to classic Genshin Impact. So if you're interested in checking out Genshin but have questions, feel free to check out our stream on twitch.tv/sharkheart. I tend to get overloaded with questions and comments on YouTube and Discord, so it's much easier to get answers when I'm live streaming. Luckily, I stream daily, so come check me out on Twitch, and hopefully I can answer any questions you have. I love you everyone, stay jawsome, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.